So, Mr. President, can I ask you a question?
Several.
Is my microphone working okay?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, thank you. Now, we've got about half an hour. It's the last event of the day, so thank you, everybody, for your patience and enthusiasm in waiting to hear what the President of Portugal is going to tell us. I'm going to start by suggesting that we leave the questions about the external conditions surrounding Europe till a little bit later on, and instead start by looking at the internal conditions. And here I'm thinking not just of the European Union as such and its institutions, but also the domestic politics in each member state and the way that the somewhat tumultuous events that we've seen in the last decade or so, and the unusual election results and referendum results, play into the ability of the member states to cooperate effectively within the EU framework. What are your thoughts about that?
Thank you for your question. May I have just 2 minutes? Thank you all to thank this invitation, very, very kind invitation, President Deus. And then to greet the President, my dear friend, President of Italy, and not yet my dear friend, but you'll become very, very soon, I'm sure, the President of Ireland. And then, coming to your question, I think it is a very important question, because at the point we need for the next 6 to 9 months, good and quick decisions from the European Union. But we must know realistically, what kind of union do we have today? We are, all of us, congratulations for your 2 speeches, pro-European. But we must be realistic. And we face several challenges. One of them is many European citizens are in a position of non-confidence or indifference concerning Europe and European ideal. Second, we know that many internal national political systems are in crisis. They are in crisis because the party systems we had, the social partner systems we had, coming from the 20th century, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, are no longer able to face the challenges of this new digital era and the new calls after the crisis people have lived. And so, we now have populist movements, populist parties, inorganic movements, xenophobic movements, Eurosceptic movements, and so on, appearing a little bit everywhere. Third, we face what is called, I don't know how and what it means, illiberal democracy. I don't know what it is, an illiberal democracy. Democracy we do know. It was the reason of Europe, since it was conceived, which means not only representative democracy or participative democracy, but fundamental rights, rule of law. And we see all of a sudden appearing so-called democracies saying we are illiberal because we elect our those that rule us, and at the same time we do not respect most of the fundamental rights that are the key of European integration. And as I've said very often, it's very difficult to have strong European leadership with weak national leaderships. And we're seeing everywhere very weak national leaderships and crises in political systems. And this is everywhere. It's not good, because European leadership they don't fall from heaven. They come from national states. If there are crises in national states, how is it possible to have strong European institutions? And then, of course, we have other challenges. Because if we do not face openly these several challenges, we shall have the next European election as a unique opportunity of fragmentation in the European Parliament, with radical movements and radical parties, anti-systemic movements and parties, forming a negative coalition and being very difficult to have a strong commission. and a strong chairman of the Commission. Perhaps having to wait too long for the new Commission. And we must be realistic. We are pro-Europeans. Perhaps it's also our fault because we didn't do the pedagogical efforts we should have done before with our public opinions, speaking to our electorates. Some of them are too far away from the European reality. And we have very little time to explain and to act. And to act because elections for the European Parliament will be there in January next year. So we have 6 to 9 months to take decisions and to show a united Europe and solidarity in Europe and a strong Europe. And there is a unique opportunity that the United States have given us with the question of Iran.
Can I take you up on this point about the decline of the traditional political party systems? Now, some of that one can attribute to social change, the shrinking of, for example, the old industrial working class base as a platform for social democratic parties and so on. Some of it you could attribute to the shortcomings of the traditional political parties themselves. Parties surely don't have a God-given right to live forever. I mean, if they get replaced, they get replaced. I mean, is there not anything you could say that it's actually healthy, perhaps, to have a renewal of a party system?
Yes, it is. It's very healthy. But we must look around and see in this new digital era, something that has changed is time. Political time is different. It's no longer political time that existed in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's quicker. And the political and electoral cycles are mini cycles, short cycles. We just leave an election and enter into a new election. And then the citizens have very high expectations. The way they act in their living with the digital, they expect the parties, they expect the systems to give answers and to reply very, very quickly. And the institutions, all the institutions, I'm a law professor, but I used today to say that law and politics are outdated. I mean, they are always behind scientific changes, technological changes, economic changes, financial changes. Because the Council of Ministers meets once a week, because the parliaments have their own way of acting. And there are every day new economic and financial challenges. And these electronic democracy, those inorganic movements, they ask more flexibility from the parties, a more inclusive way of integrating quickly new problems, new challenges. When I said it was a problem concerning European integration, because Europe was conceived based upon two strong families. It was the Christian democratic and the socialist and social democratic family. One of them is in big crisis, the socialist and social democratic family. And the EPP is no longer the EPP that used to exist. The EPP is so large, that has several EPPs inside the family. At the same time, new parties appeared based on fear, because the crisis creates fear. And those parties, more radical parties, in the left or in the right, they come with the fear. We are going to lose our jobs. We're going to lose with migration. We lose with the refugees. We're going to lose without protectionism. And of course, we must face those challenges in a positive way. In a positive way. Some of them are inevitable. So the parties must change. But the problem is not to have change. We need that change. Is that we must have that change together with the idea that Europe is not only useful, but it is essential for the Europeans. And this message is a message that the former strong parties have lost. They have lost.
You referred a few minutes ago to, you used this famous phrase, illiberal democracy in quotes, and it conjures up an image for some people of a allegedly growing gap almost in values, certainly in the quality of democracy and the quality of rule in law between, to oversimplify a little, the two halves of Europe. I mean, do you think there is a serious problem here that judgments are taking place on each side of Europe, and there are misunderstandings, there are criticisms being fired at each other? Sometimes one feels in the original member states of the EU, dating back to the 1950s, that there's almost a nostalgia for the days when there were considerably fewer than 20 member states. How serious is this problem?
Well, once again, it's a problem of education, of pedagogy. I mean, we need not to break bridges between the different countries, partners in Europe, north and south, east and west. Never break them. And building dialogue, always, without exception. And sometimes this may appear as a little bit more difficult, but we must do it. We must do it in our own countries and in dialogue with other countries. Because we cannot say that the crisis is just in several countries. The crisis, the world crisis, financial world crisis, and then the European crisis we faced several years ago, created the same environment for the crisis in political and economic and social systems. They must adjust and adjust very, very quickly. So, of course, we must declare and stick to our in the sense of our European values, but try not to break the unity of Europe. The world needs a strong, united Europe.
One manifestation of these differences of view, differences of even national interest, relates to the next long-term European Union budget, the 2021 to 27 budget. Now, this is an issue where the differences aren't neatly between one geographical area and another. They crisscross different policy fields. They relate to the fact there are intense discussions going on about shifting the balance of expenditure here and there. How do you see it from Portugal?
Well, I try to give not a Portuguese answer, but an European answer. Well, I don't feel it is impossible to have dialogue also on that very, very tough and difficult subject, the multi-annual framework, financial framework. First of all, I think we can agree, all of us, that a quicker decision is better than a postponed decision. We'll never know how the composition of the next European Parliament will be. We'll never know how difficult it will be to form the new European Commission. Why postpone for the future a decision so necessary, so important for 21 and until 27, not taking the decisions immediately, instead of waiting? What for? For something that will be tougher as a context to decide. Second, I do believe it's possible to have dialogue also concerning the budget as a whole. If it's not, I would prefer near 1.2. But if it is 1.145 or 6, better than 1.1112, well, it's better. It's better for European ambition. Do we want a strong Europe or not in the world? Without budget? We're joking. We're joking. What is a state? And we would have said it's impossible. We want at least something when we speak of defense, security, migrations, and other challenges, asking for more money. Well, but let us put it 1.1314. Third, I don't see inevitably that it's not possible to have a dialogue between those that are very much pro-cohesion and pro-agricultural common policy, and those that would not like to pay more for it. Because we could mix up two different frameworks. The one, the traditional cohesion one. Well, there it is, the cohesion. We're rationalizing the tools, rethinking the tools, looking to see if it is fair or not the way you really allocate the resources. But then, why not have at the same time another framework for the Eurozone countries, supporting their structural reforms, having a way of paying, or at least not paying, of celebrating agreements, conditional agreements, connected with the European semester, and saying, you have a need for qualification, okay, we shall allocate these resources, but you must show you're doing it. You must show reducing your deficit, reducing your debt. Yeah. It's a kind of convergence agreement arrangement. And at the same time, I think it's not impossible to agree on the fact that we need, perhaps, more own resources. Is it impossible to agree on a digital tax? On an environmental tax? Is it? Even on the idea of having more contribution from the different states, member states, even if it is small. So instead of stressing what is the difference between us, let us try to find out what should be and could be common. Okay, don't speak of cohesion. And I'm at ease because Portugal usually speaks of cohesion and of agricultural policy. But then do speak of those countries that are working on convergence and finance conditionally the efforts for the deficit and the public debt reduction. With imagination, we couldn't find a way of not having a split between Eastern and Western, Northern and Central European countries and Southern European countries. And let us try to do it. We could do it. For instance, I don't feel, now coming to Portugal, that the Portuguese position is so far away from the Italian one. I would say that we agree in most of it, and with the Irish also. And little by little, we could try to build an arrangement. Nobody's perfect. Nobody will be completely happy. Nobody. But avoiding a hard line, the hardliners and the softliners, let us avoid it. We cannot afford to have division in Europe now, when Europe is needed for the world. We cannot afford it.
I'm going to come in here because you mentioned the word world, and I feel we should try and expand our horizons a bit. The thing that I recall about the early years when the European Union was beginning to put together a common foreign policy and security strategy was that one of the assumptions was that Europe would act as a loyal, reliable, and kind of ever stronger ally of the United States. Is that assumption blown out of the water nowadays?
No.
Because of what's happened over the Iran nuclear program and other trade differences?
No, never, never. The way I see it, Europe is a very constant and trustable ally of the United States of America, and will always be. We show it in NATO. Even when the United States for a while was not clear, apparently, concerning NATO, we were there. We were there while some people speculated on how the United States saw Russia, we were there.
But the question is, does the Trump administration see Europe there?
I sense it does depend upon an administration. Something that is stronger than administration. Administration like presidents and governments arrive and leave. They are not eternal. I mean, countries are long-lasting realities, and alliances are much more important than presidents and governments. It's our Portuguese experience. We have several presidents, and center-right, center-left, left, and governments, and the foreign policy is there, the same.
But one of the interesting points, though...
Speaking of Iran, coming to Iran. Iran is a very good example. I mean, we signed, all of us, the same agreement. I mean, an agreement is not signed by an administration, it's signed by a country. When I sign an agreement, I don't say it's my agreement, it's Marcelo's agreement, or it is the government of Antonio Costa or Passos Coelho agreement. No, it's the Portuguese signature that is there. Well, so Europe is where it always was. I mean, there was the deal, there was the agreement, we are there. Well, for reasons that we respect, and we do not comment the decisions of heads of states of allied countries. There was a change. Well, there comes the moment for Europe to show how important it is. Who could bridge different realities? Who could build those bridges? Who is able to speak with the United States and with Iran? Who? Not China, not Russia. From those that signed the treaty, well, it is Germany, United Kingdom, and France. I mean, European Union. European Union. Let us forget for a while, considering that it is irreversible, and we know that very few things in politics are irreversible, but very few, so in the long run. But let us imagine for a while it is irreversible. Anyway, the first moment there was a key decision asking Europe for action, there they were. United Kingdom, France, and Germany, meaning United Kingdom and in the European Union. So we must build those bridges. It's possible, it is possible, because at the end of the speech, President Trump said, after all, that he left a small space open for a new deal, for a new agreement. So in a sense, it's up to us to keep what is vital in this agreement. Because it is important, we believe, we Europeans, it's important for Europe, it's important for the world. Because we don't want more dangerous situation concerning nuclear proliferation. Because we don't want, you know, in political decisions, time is vital. And time means reactions, after reactions. So we must find in a short period a way of putting people in dialogue permanently. That's very European. That's all about Europe. It's the way Europe was conceived and has been living for centuries, for thousands of years.
I suppose the question that you mentioned, the notion that in terms of foreign policy, national interests transcend a government that's temporarily in office and then replaced by another. But one of the interesting things is that if one looks at countries that regained their independence after the end of communism, or perhaps even became independent for the first time in their history, largely, of course, in East Central Europe, some of those countries are the ones that are most passionate about retaining the American security guarantee.
And I do understand them. I was in some of those countries because we have Portuguese army there defending European and world interests, and I do understand why they do feel what they feel. The way people must understand what we do feel when we receive migrants and refugees. that are not received directly in Northern Europe or in Central Europe. I mean, when I see some of our partners in Eastern Europe concerned, and they were very concerned for a long while, because they wanted a clear answer from NATO. And we were there, we were asked, and we replied, okay, we shall get to the 2% of the product paying for military expenditure. But we were there. And finally, we discovered, which was obvious for us, that the aims of NATO were there also. Well, good to see that everybody agrees now that NATO's aims are the same. So in a sense, I do understand what they feel. Because they live there, they face every day a certain specific situation. We do respect it, and that's solidarity. Our army is there.
Yes, that's the theme of this year's conference in Fiesole, solidarity. Do you feel that this is a concept that, and we will wrap up with this question, I think, because we have to finish on the dot at 7. Do you feel this is a concept, solidarity, that resonates with the European public as much as as one might wish it to resonate, given the somewhat slow healing process of economic conditions?
You're right. There you're right. I mean, we must not forget the crisis that Europeans have been suffering, both the world and European and the national crisis. And so many Europeans in a period of crisis, a long period of crisis, we suffered it also in Portugal, as you know it. They become egocentric because they have to survive. And when people have to fight for survival, it's tougher sometimes to speak of solidarity. But that's when you need more solidarity. When you need more solidarity. And I must admit, we Portuguese received solidarity from many European partners. And we showed our solidarity too. And Europe must show solidarity concerning migrations and refugees. And at the same time must have growth and jobs. Because there are new challenges concerning new technologies and new jobs. Reality, social reality has changed. And many people were left behind. And those people that were left behind are, in most of the cases, the reason why we have very strong inorganic movements and contestation movements or parties, because they felt we need someone to represent us. So you're right. It's up to those that have political responsibilities and those structures and those parties and those social partners to understand the reality of those in the electorates that because they become too old, because they become outdated technologically speaking, they feel they were forgotten. And the worst thing that could happen was a cleavage in age between the very young people saying we received a world we do not understand, what an heritage we received, and those that become too older generations and say we are in a ghetto, we live in a social ghetto, because it's the social ghetto that explains xenophobia, sometimes even hyper-nationalism and other populist movements. And we must try to integrate in Europe, integrate those realities, trying to solve those social claims. They exist, economic and social claims. They do exist. That's why I said in the beginning it's a little bit our fault. We were not able to solve several problems. And in politics, there is no space without a structure or movement or a party that appears to fill it. Other people will fill it. Less European, less moderate, some of them anti-systemic. In a sense, I would to say a word on Portugal. In a sense, those last years in our political life showed with a center-right-wing government that had the very tough task of facing a deficit and trying to recover the economy. And then with the left-wing government, supported by parties that used to be considered outside the system, outside in the sense of not being in power for very long, we showed with different ways how it is important to try to face the challenges, social challenges, try to create solutions for them, and try to integrate in the system different realities, avoiding radical, populist, anti-European movements. Of course, nobody's perfect. Nobody knows what will happen in the future, but it's something we pro-European must do every day. Every day. As you said, starting with the social problems that really the different crises created.
Well, it's certainly been stimulating to watch these creative solutions that have been put together in Portugal. It would be delightful to carry on all evening with you, Mr. President, but I'm afraid our time is up. We do have to stick to the schedule. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to thank President Rebelo de Sousa for his contribution today.